If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
History's made in Los Angeles, but first, the Knicks survive in Orlando. We'll be talking plenty about LeBron's record-making night later on in the show, but we will be talking Knicks here on Orange and Blue Bloods. I'm EJ Stewart, joined by my co-host Tommy Beer. Great show lined up for you guys. As I said, we'll be talking about LeBron's historic night in Los Angeles, where he passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to become the NBA's all-time leading scorer. This is also our last episode before the trade deadline, so we'll be talking about the last rumors that we're hearing before we get to Thursday. We'll have a Friday episode recapping all the stuff that happens, Knicks or non-Knicks. We will be discussing it on Friday. So we'll give you guys a little preview of the trade deadline here, and then we'll also talk about this big win that happened over in Orlando in a game that was a road game, but really didn't feel much like a road game. And Knicks certainly felt that way in the post game as well. So plenty to talk about on this episode. Joining me is my co-host, Tommy Beer. Tommy, what's happening, man?
Big shot in NBA history last night, something we'll be talking about for a long time. And of course, I'm referencing Jalen Brunson's floater with about a minute left with the Knicks up 89-88.
Oh, man, yes.
Incredibly important game. So, yeah, good stuff. A lot to chat about.
Great stuff there. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode and you enjoyed this podcast, Orange and Blue Bloods, a reminder that this is an Odyssey original that you can find wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Odyssey app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your downloading streaming service so that you can get these episodes whenever we drop. Like I said, we drop 3 times a week. This is the second episode. This week we'll have another episode Friday recapping the NBA trade deadline. We're also on YouTube, so make sure you guys check us out there. We're on the Odyssey Sports channel. If you guys want to watch these episodes, we do not only our segments, but the full episode of the podcast is posted on YouTube. So make sure you guys check us out there. Odyssey Sports is the channel on YouTube. But let's begin talking about this Knicks win. So New York had to overcome a lackluster first half and a seesaw battle in the fourth quarter to beat the pesky Magic in Orlando in front of a near record attendance at Amway Center that was overtaken by Knicks fans. It was really quite the scene. I was watching the game. I didn't have the sound on, but I'm just watching the crowd reactions after the big buckets from the Knicks down the stretch. You would have thought you were at Madison Square Garden. It was actually incredible to watch. The Knicks had some big buckets down the stretch from Jalen Brunson. As Tommy mentioned, the big shot that wasn't LeBron's, of course, a record-breaking shot. Brunson finished with 25 points in this one. He was 9 of 13 from the field, so a super efficient night scoring the ball for Jalen Brunson. Julius Randle at 22 and 14. Emmanuel quickly came off the bench and added 18 for the Orlando Magic, who I think really were impressive in this game. I think they've been impressive for a lot of the season, despite the record. Markelle Fultz had 21. Franz Wagner, their second-year player, had 18 points. So an impressive showing by the Magic, but nonetheless, the Knicks do get a W. So when you look at this game, Tommy, I talked about how impressive the Magic were. How do you take the Knicks win in this? Because some people will look at the Knicks struggles in this game and say, why did it take so long to get the lead, and why weren't they able to put Orlando away earlier? Why were they behind so much? But then you may say, hey, they showed some grit on the road and they got a win that I think a lot of Knicks fans maybe were expecting them to lose, considering the comeback victory, that's the miracle victory in some ways they had against the Sixers on Sunday.
Yeah, I like as we've talked about at various times this year, get the W's when you can get the W's. Magic are a good team, not a great team, but 5 games over 500. Their previous, I think it was 29, 30 games. They had played well despite the terrible start to the season. Some good young talent, well coached by Jamal Mosley. And Knicks got a victory, on the road. The one thing I was worried about, actually, with all the Knicks fans down in Orlando, was the Knicks might think it's a home game and lose.
Right. In some ways they played like a home game. Exactly.
Better on the road. But to me, and also in terms of the closing out the game, there was some adjustments made by Tibbs late in the game. We'll kind of get into those details, some offense, defense, things we've been asking for, substituting Sims and Hartenstein in to get that final rebound. They didn't block out the shooter like they did with Luka, which drove me crazy. But they still got the rebound. And we'll kind of get into those details. To me, though, the main takeaway, and this is the final game before the trade deadline. This is the one of the few final games before the All-Star break. To me, the takeaway is Jalen Brunson and the importance and the impact that this man has had on the franchise since the moment he arrived has been remarkable. And it was again last night. They don't win that game without Jalen Brunson taking over down the stretch. Big baskets, 2 floaters, a 20-foot jumper, a dish to Sims for a dunk. Anything that goes well for the Knicks in the last 5 minutes of a close game seems to be made either a basket or an assist off Jalen Brunson's hands. Looking at the numbers this morning, I think they tell the story even more than we may have thought. Brunson scored his 120th. He made 4 free throws in the final 10 seconds last night. That 4th free throw was his 120th point in the clutch this season. That is the most in the NBA. He's now 1 point ahead of De'Aaron Fox. For those that might not be familiar, the way NBA defines clutch is if the score is within 5 points and there's 5 minutes or less in the game. So anything that falls within those parameters is defined as clutch. NBA tracking data, tracks it correspondingly. And again, Brunson leads the league in clutch points. It's not just that he's productive in those instances. He's also been efficient, shooting 49% from the floor, over 82% from the free throw line, and especially in since the calendar flipped to 2023. Since January 4th, which is the second Knicks game, they won a 20-point blowout on January 2nd. On January 4th, they had a comeback victory. In the 5 weeks since, Jalen Brunson has scored 60 points in the clutch. He's shooting 55% from the floor in those instances. That is by far and away the highest number in the league. The only player with more than 35 clutch points over that 5-week stretch is LeBron James, who has 51.
Wow.
Incredibly, Jalen Brunson has more points in the clutch, 60, than 10 other NBA teams. Again, a lot has to do with the fact that the Knicks have played a ton of close games. Either when they're up big, when they're up double digits, they give it back. When they're down double digits, they force it and make a run and have close games. So the Knicks have played the second most clutch minutes during the span, the Lakers being number 1. But again, it just speaks to Jalen Brunson. We've talked about a few things that have happened even within the last couple of days. Brunson outplays Harden in a victory over the Sixers. Harden's one of the other players that was considered a snub. The next day, Kyrie Irving gets traded out west to the Dallas Mavericks. The next day, Kevin Durant, it's reported he's going to pull out of the All-Star game. And then Brunson puts the team on his back again on for a road when they win another game. 4 games over 500. Looks like there's going to be 2 open slots on that Eastern Conference team, with Kyrie shifting over the West, probably replacing Steph Curry. But now we also have KD sidelined. Jalen Brunson's earned an All-Star bid. He deserves an All-Star bid. I expect him to be named an All-Star replacement within the next day or so.
Yeah, Jalen Brunson definitely was a story of the game. Brunson was awesome down the stretch. And to me, this was another example of a game last season where the Knicks lose. Like, they don't have that floor general. They don't have that guy that can just beat his man off the dribble and get a bucket or get a bucket for somebody else. Like, how many times last season did we see, and sometimes even this season, the team get bogged down by Julius Randle isolation? I think one of the great signs from this game was that they ran the offense almost exclusively through Brunson down the stretch. In fact, the one play where they didn't run through Brunson, Randle fell and traveled, So and it kind of I think it kind of shows them, hey, let's go away from that again. Let's go back to going through Jalen Brunson. So Brunson was spectacular again. I mean, and to his credit too, Orlando's a tough defensive team. I mean, Markelle Fultz is an incredible athlete. I thought he looked really good last night. He looked great defensively. Jalen Suggs is a great defender as well. I mean, they got dogs in terms of guys who can guard you man to man. I think that's why Brunson only got 13 shots. I don't think he was necessarily trying to hoist him up, because that was going to be a tough matchup for him. 2 long, athletic, defensive-minded guys gave him problems. He still had 25, 9 to 13, hit some clutch baskets. So all the credit to Jalen Brunson for a spectacular game. And yeah, I take the positive from this game. I'm not going to look at this one and say, hey, Knicks playing against Orlando team that's young, and maybe they should have smacked these guys around, considering they had another big game this week against the Sixers. Like, this was a game that I kind of was expecting the Knicks to lose. Like, I really saw what happened on Sunday and said, they're going to go down to Florida. They're going to see all those Knicks fans. They're going to think it's all sweet, and Orlando's going to take it to them. And for the first half, and definitely for the first quarter plus, that's what it looked like, But credit for the Knicks for battling back against a team that I think is on the come up. Like, I don't know if it's next season, but it feels like the Magic really are building something. When you see Wagner and Banchero, and I mean, I forgot Jonathan Isaac was a basketball player before this a couple weeks ago, but you see him out there battling Randle. He looked good defensively. I mean, they got some guys. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not they can have Banchero, one of these guys, really become the superstar that they're hoping. But there's reason to be optimistic at all.
Or if they ever win the lottery, jeez.
Or yeah, if they win the lottery and they get Wembanyama, then next year I think they're a playoff team. I think that they would take a big jump in just, I think, 1 year. But yeah, the credit to the Magic, I think, for playing hard that night. That night they definitely had an effort that could have been worth a win against a Knicks team that's been good this year. But shout out to the Knicks for battling. You mentioned Tibbs's fourth quarter. I think this might have been the best fourth quarter Tibbs has maybe ever coached as a Knicks coach, which is crazy that we're in year 3 and it took this long for me to say that. But I was like dumbfounded in a positive way at just like how he adjusted. I love that they ran the offense through Brunson. You talked about the offense, defense substitutions. He was getting Grimes in there when he didn't have to. He took RJ out for one defensive possession. On the last rebound, he puts in Hardenstein. As I'm watching Orlando throw Bol in there. I'm like, oh God, is he awake? Does he see what's going on? And he was paying attention. And the Knicks secured that offensive rebound, the defensive rebound. Shout out to Julius Randle for a man's rebound and getting that ball. Like Tibbs he coached a masterclass in that last 5 minutes. Again, no way would I have expected that, but he did a really great job down the stretch, and he deserves credit for that.
Definitely. And he subbed out Brunson on a defensive substitution.
Yes,
there,
he did.
And, something that we've talked about before. I would have probably liked to have seen McBride in there instead of RJ, who, speaking of that first half, and I agree with you, a lot to take away positively. There's a lot of pluses. RJ Barrett's regression continues. In the first half, he was awful. He's had some awful halves this year, but that was arguably his most of. It was 1 from 7 from the floor, and defensively he was lost. Franz Wagner was just eating him for lunch, losing him backdoor over the screens, wasn't seeing the floor. To RJ's credit, bounced back in the second half. It was 1 for 20 from 3 and then banked in a 3. I think that kind of helped him get going. He'll take it. But the more we've seen over the last couple of weeks, it's hard to make an argument that RJ deserves minutes over IQ and Grimes. The way those guys have played, the way those guys contribute on both ends of the floor. I don't think IQ's a perfect fit with that second unit. He's basically the team's 6th starter anyway. So I don't think you necessarily need to make a move. And RJ's a pride guy, understandably so. He's not going to be yanked. I don't think he'd respond positively to that from the starting lineup. But RJ, if the Knicks are going to secure the 6th seed, make a run towards, and just kind of continue their development, not only the next 2 months, but the next 2 years, the next 5 years. RJ is going to have to start moving in the right direction. And there are some worrisome signs. Maybe I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was overcoming that illness.
Sick.
He was sick on Sunday, so he's working his way back. To me, then Tibbs, it's incumbent on, Tibbs has to take him out, not play him 13 minutes in the first 16 minutes of the game. On the night, he was -9. He was minus 15 in 13 first half minutes, and -9 on the evening, whereas IQ was +9. So we'll have that conversation another day. But again, it's another little warning sign for me. That cause for concern, shall we say? Does that get if the Knicks trade for OG, which doesn't sound likely, but we'll talk about it at the end of the show. The kind of consensus thinking probably would be that RJ would slide to the 2 and bump Grimes to the bench. I don't know if that's again at this point, it's hard to make the argument that RJ has earned minutes over either IQ or Grimes.
Yeah, I mean RJ. Now, I did think that he lost Franz once in the fourth quarter, which was a bad backdoor, but he definitely picked it up defensively in the second half, which continues to be his story. Is that he can have these miserable first halves where he's kind of killing the team, and then I think he hit a big 3 in that fourth quarter as well. So it's too much inconsistency. He needs to play consistent. I still feel like he really hasn't. And I talked about it on one of the other podcast episodes. Like, Tibbs had mentioned that, they feel like he's still getting back from the time off from the finger injury. Like, I still feel like he hasn't been 100% right since then. But at the same time, this has been kind of, again, like I said, his story, not just before that injury. I mean, it's been his story. I mean, not just since that injury, but it's his story before that injury. So the defense has to get better. He has to play 4 quarters of defense. You can't have what you had for that first half in last night's game. And I do think that I agree. I don't think taking him on a starting lineup really makes that much sense because I don't think he'd respond to it. I also don't know depending on the matchups, that I want Quentin Grimes guarding threes like consistently. Right. Like that sounds like that would be not necessarily the best use for him. So RJ has to start 3 as long as this is the roster we have. But yeah, closing games and depending on the lineups, like I think it's a night-to-night basis. I think if RJ is struggling, then I don't think he should be out there. If he's playing well, he's giving you offense, which we know he can, like he did against Miami, then he should be out there. But yeah, I do think it's becoming more of a game-to-game basis. It's not necessarily automatic that he's out there. It's a little. It is what it is. I do think from the coaching standpoint, to see how much Julius Randle killed the team last year and how Tibbs closed with him pretty almost every single night. And now to see that this is happening to RJ, I'm sure that's why RJ was a little upset a couple of games ago when Tibbs said that, we're doing what's best for the team, when there was plenty of games last season when it was best for the team for Randle not to finish the game and for either RJ to play the 4 or Obi to finish the game. But nonetheless, RJ's got to play better. If he wants to stay on the floor, he can't play the way he played in that first half. No question.
Agreed.
And
one other thing on I just meant to mention with Brunson is the value of his contributions late in the fourth quarter and crunch time is highlighted by the struggles that Randall and Barrett have had closing games. We saw it last season, and Brunson has more points in the clutch than Randall and Barrett combined this season. So the NBA has that new award this year, the Clutch Player of the Year. I think right now Brunson's the odds-on favorite to win it. I think he should win it. Again, not just because of his production, but also his efficiency and how important that has been. Knicks have 16 games this season with crunch. They've won 16 crunch time games this season. That's more than they had they had 18 all of last year, 12 the 2 years before. I think 13 the year. But so just again, tons of praise to Jalen Brunson. The way he's turned around this franchise in a short period of time really has been remarkable.
Yep, absolutely. And Brunson's efforts helped the Knicks improve to 30-26, 4 games above 500. They're now in a kind of statistical tie with the Miami Heat 25. So he has a slightly better winning percentage, hence why they're still the 6th seed right now. But right now, same amount of games back behind Boston for the first seed, 9 games. So Knicks are in good position continually. And we talked about this stretch of games being an extremely difficult stretch. The Knicks haven't really treated it as such. They've essentially treaded water without Mitchell Robinson. Like, I think that if you're a Knicks fan, for whatever reason, there seems to be a lot of conversation about the negativity about the team not being better than they are and why aren't they a championship contender. I mean, look, they've treaded water against some of the best teams in the league, and they don't have Mitchell Robinson. I think when Mitchell Robinson comes back, I think you do wonder, hey, can this team get to that 6th spot? Can this team compete in the first-round matchup with some of these top teams? I think it's going to be a more interesting thing to follow than maybe people considered when Mitchell Robinson went down. And I do want to give a shout-out to the Knicks fans that were in Orlando. It's not go unnoticed from Julius Randle, who talked about that after the game.
Yeah, they always show it big here, so it's fun playing here. It almost feels like a home game.
So shout-out to the Knicks fans, Julius Randle mentioning how it felt like a home game. They were awesome. And way to see them take over was pretty awesome. So big Knicks win. Credit to the guys for getting it done. But let's move. Yeah, go ahead.
Lastly, just on that point about the tough stretch of the schedule. Basically, we had said if the Knicks can get to the All-Star break at 500, you take that all day long. They're 4 games over 500 with 4 games left before the All-Star break at Philly, Utah at home, Brooklyn at home. Looks like Durant won't be available, and then at Atlanta. So if the Knicks can win just one of those games, they're above 2 games above 500. Even if they lose all 4, they're at 500. So really commendable job by the Knicks for keeping their head above water. Difficult stretch, no Mitchell Robinson, and they're still 4 games over 500.
Yeah, and now you start to get greedy. You kind of wonder if they can even improve that, because you look at those teams, you say, hey, no world beaters. No, before that, you would have said, without Mitchell Robinson, it's going to be tough. But, Nets don't have Kyrie. Atlanta still kind of seems to be, we'll see what they do at the trade deadline. All those guys are still on the team. Utah, maybe sellers. They may not be guys on their team by the time they play them. So now you're looking at a test that looks very difficult. And you say, hey, maybe could you win 3 out of 4? Could you at least split? So Knicks in good shape right now. But let's talk about this trade deadline. This will be the last pod before Thursday's deadline. We have a few rumors to chew on, but first I do want to play some sound from Jalen Brunson, who talked about what he's expecting or not expecting during the trade deadline and how he feels about where the team is right now.
As professionals, our job is to show up every day and play basketball and let the front office deal with all those situations. But I love my teammates. Getting to know these guys, they've been welcoming for the guys that were here before me, and the relationships we made with these past couple months has been special. And so I love these guys, and that's all I can say.
So we'll see how many of Brunson's teammates remain on the team after Thursday. Michael Scotta was reporting today that the Knicks have expressed interest in Portland Trailblazers forward Josh Hart. Hart is averaging 9.5 points a game on 50% shooting. He's also averaging 6 rebounds. He's also a Villanova grad, similar to Jalen Brunson. So interesting note there. Also, Knicks appear to be out on the OG Anunoby sweepstakes, which Tommy mentioned earlier. So Yahoo's Jake Fisher was on SNY's The Putback, and he said that the Knicks are not actively pursuing a Raptors combo forward OG Anunoby. He says there are a number of teams who still are, and there's a chance that OG does get traded, but it doesn't appear like the Knicks, or the Nets for that matter, are in on OG Anunoby. So I want to start with the Josh Hart fit first, because I'll be honest, like Josh Hart is a guy I've been trying to get on the Knicks, in my conversations on Twitter and with people who are fellow Knicks fans for years. Like I feel like he'd be an absolute perfect fit for the Knicks. I liked him during the draft, and the fact that the Knicks have been interested in him in the past, it's not surprising that the Knicks are once again circling the wagons on Josh Hart as the Portland Trailblazers reach a tough decision about where their season is going. Do you like the fit of Josh Hart on this Knicks team?
Yeah, it's hard not to be a fan of Josh Hart if you're a fan of winning basketball. Guy just does what it takes to win. I think it was earlier this season or maybe late last year, he had a 20 rebound game at the Garden. It's a guy that just contributes on both ends of the floor. Dating back to his Villanova days, a winning player, can score if you need it, can defend if you need it, versatile, can guard the 2, the 3, and slide it kind of across the perimeter. He's willing to make the hockey assist, be a connector offensively, can score on all 3 levels. Not a great scorer, but decent efficiency wise. Good teammate guy, good locker room guy. So depending on the cost, we'll see if the Blazers are just looking to kind of shed salary tax and maybe add some young component pieces. Whether they would take back Cam Reddish to get up the salary, but Hart's also on a good contract as well.
Yes,
so
he is.
it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, definitely in terms of adding that rotation piece, gives you some flexibility. We've talked about RJ's struggles. Hart's definitely a guy that could switch, start at the 3, would be happy coming off the bench. So that's definitely something to get excited about. We'll see if my assumption is if the Blazers are willing to move him, there'll be plenty of teams pursuing his services. So we'll see what the Knicks would be willing to put on the table.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Josh Hart, first of all, an all-time like locker room kind of guy, like a guy that teammates love him, coaches love him. Like I remember when they brought him into Portland, and I think he had kind of a conversation with Chauncey, like why am I like still playing? Like not necessarily he cared, but just that like they were kind of tanking and there were a lot of young guys, and he was taking a lot of shots for them. Like he was playing a lot of minutes. They had that big come back against the Knicks. He played a lot of minutes in that game in Portland. And I think Chauncey had told him, like, the way you approach the game, your professionalism, the way you play every single night hard. Like, other guys on this team, these young guys that we're trying to develop, like, they need to see that. Like, if they don't see that, then, like, us throwing them out there without someone to kind of, like, lead the way is pointless. And we need you to take that role. And Chauncey was so happy with Hart and how he kind of led them through those games without Damian Lillard to end the season as they were moving towards a youth movement, and that Josh Hart was a professional and that he really gave them great games last season down the stretch. And in this season, now switching to another role where now you're all right, now you're more of a defender. You're now more of a get your points where you can kind of guy, but you're going to rebound, you're going to hustle. Like I just always been a Josh Hart fan. I mean, I know I watched a lot of Big East basketball, so I watched him at Villanova, but I thought he was a great player at Villanova. I would love to see Josh Hart here. I think that in some ways, if there were certain guys that I said, oh, this guy is like built to play for Tom Thibodeau, Josh Hart is the guy on the short list of guys in the NBA currently. I mean, he seems like right from the Tibbs era of basketball. So I would love Knicks to get him in here. Whether that's trading Cam out, if they get Cam out of here and they get Josh Hart, I think that's an absolute coup, especially when you're hearing that they may buy out Cam, which is insane that this is what it's come to. But they can get Cam out here, or they can get Derrick Rose out of here, and bring in a guy he'd be the perfect wing that can come in and when RJ is struggling defensively, you can say, okay, we don't have to commit to maybe a smaller, 3-guard lineup of IQ, Brunson, and Grimes. We can actually put Josh Hart out there. He can guard a small forward, So there's a lot of reasons I think to think that Josh Hart will be a good fit. What did you make of the OG Anunoby report that the Knicks are out of the season?
I would love for the Knicks to get OG. We've talked about it previously. We'll see if it, again, there's probably a lot of smoke, we'll see what direction the wind's blowing. We're about recording this at 1:30 on Wednesday. So we still got another, 25 and a half hours or so before the deadline. So there surely will be a lot of rumors and speculation and innuendo tonight, tomorrow morning. And my hope is that actually the Knicks, the buzz and the kind of chatter around Knicks and OG picks up a little bit. I just think he would be a great fit on this team. You talk about whereas RJ's not a great fit, kind of a high volume scorer, can contribute. He and to RJ's credit, he made some good passes last night as well. But OG's a guy that if you slide in between, if Randall and Brunson are kind of your two bookends, to have OG in the middle, 3-and-D wing defender, leads the league in steals, just a really one of the better perimeter defenders, wing defenders in the NBA. You have your scoring locked down in Brunson and Randall. Then you have a defender in the back line in Mitchell Robinson, a defender on the front line in OG, and on the wing. Then you had Grimes, who can shoot the three but also defend. I just think that's a great combination, a great mix. That does obviously complicate issues with RJ with RJ Barrett, assuming he's not sent to Toronto in the deal, which is a little difficult due to his poison pill contract and the max extension. He's not the max extension, but the rookie scale extension he signed. And then there's, how does the minutes impact primarily RJ, IQ, and Grimes? So it's not a perfect fit by any means, but I just think the player and the player type, he's the prototypical small forward that fits well alongside a Randall and Brunson kind of tag team 1-4. So that for that reason, I think it'd be a really solid fit. Obviously, the cost is the determining factor. Ian Begley had reported that there was 3 first-round picks potentially put on the table. Obviously, and as we've talked about time and time again, are they protected picks? Are they the picks from the Wizards, or the picks from the Bucks, or the Knicks unprotected picks? All that would have to get sorted out. But just in a vacuum, I would be very interested to see what the Raptors would accept for OG and what the Knicks could get back. And the other issue, finally, on Anunoby is he only has 1 year left on his contract, and he can opt out and become a free agent as a player option, which you assume he'll exercise. The talks behind the scenes, is he willing to sign an extension this offseason? You kind of assume if you give up that extent of draft capital for a guy, that you have had conversations with him and his agency, and they've kind of come to an understanding on the general terms of a long-term contract. But to me, if that's a guy still young, 24, 25 years old, that you can lock up and bring into your organization, have him grow alongside Brunson and the rest of the gang, that's a player I like a lot.
Yeah, I think that OG is a really solid player. I mean, I've noted that I felt like some of the interest in him has been a little overblown on this. I said on the last podcast. So to me, the Knicks bowing out to me tells me that the price tag just got too high. Like, I think that if the Knicks could get him, I think that they would have got him. But I think they're probably asking for unprotected picks for OG Anunoby. And look, we saw what Rudy Gobert went for. So as long as that is the baseline, like, part of me kind of hopes that maybe the Kyrie Irving trade could kind of kind of reset the market a little bit. Like, I think regardless of Kyrie's issues, I think we all think he's better than Rudy Gobert. Like, he only went for 1 unprotected. So I was hoping maybe that would reset the market. Maybe that hasn't happened yet. But considering what Rudy Gobert went for, with Dejounte Murray went for, that these teams are going to now try to, stick up any team that's trying to trade for a plus starting player, I
think that's a real big reason why we haven't seen anything. It's been tumbleweeds across the NBA. Usually there's a bunch of trades in the days leading up, and we still have an hour left. I think all these teams are holding on to OG and the other players, and expecting that Rudy Gobert haul which is just unrealistic at this point. I think the other GMs are like, listen, that was an outlier, like the market needs to recalibrate, like we're and until you guys come back down to earth, that's why I think in like the hours before the deadline, some teams are going to say, okay, they're finally, I guess we have to accept, the sellers have to accept the new parameters. Kyrie is a different case because there's just the old headaches and toxicity involved.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, there's very unlikely to be a player traded that's more talented or better than Kyrie Irving, and and that return was relatively limited. So we'll see if that does. In fact, we'll see. I think it's a great game of chicken going on right now between because the sellers know there's only a handful of sellers because the teams are so tightly bunched that there's a lot of buyers and very few sellers, and the sellers have seen that you trade and someone close to an all-star caliber player, you get a ton back. Via Gobert and the DeJounte Murray deal. So that's kind of what they're holding out for. Whereas the buyers are saying, listen, that, we're not going to make the same mistakes the other team did. So if you want to hold on to a guy and, get it closer to free agency and, spend the second half of the season in purgatory, so be it. But we just can't match those exorbitant price tags.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not dealing with the Charlotte Hornets, the Detroit Pistons, the Spurs, or the Rockets, you're dealing with a team that has a shot to make the playoffs. That's it. There's only 4 teams in the NBA you're looking at and say, okay, they're way too far gone. They're not going to make the playoffs. We talked about the Magic, who the Knicks just beat. They're only 3 games out of the last spot of the play-in. Now, should they try to get that play-in spot? I would say maybe probably not. Like, they should probably just tank and try to get to add a Wembanyama to their squad, or maybe a Scoot Henderson or some of those other young guys, the Thompson twins, to their squad. But, the Lakers, who we're talking about in a second, they're definitely not tanking. They're definitely not tanking. They don't have a first-round pick, I believe. I don't know if they do. They definitely don't. They're not tanking at this point. So, like, those are it. That's it. 4 teams that you can say, okay, those teams are definitely sellers. You could probably get someone cheap, which is, in some ways, I think helps a team like the Rockets because we've heard about these Eric Gordon trade rumors, but they're like, hey, we're the only real sellers that have a piece that anybody would probably want, them in Detroit. So they're like, we're going to hold off to maybe we can get an extra first-round pick or an unprotected pick, So, and then people assume Utah will be in that mix, but I mean, who knows what Danny Ainge wants to do? So it's that does make it tough. That does make it tough, and I do think it makes it interesting regarding how many big moves will happen. Like, I'll be honest, I come into this trade deadline not expecting the Knicks to really do anything of significance. Like, I think that maybe Cam is traded, but they're not going to get anything back, I think, of value. Like Josh Hart would be a dream. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Cam will be traded for a box of cookies, more or less. And I don't know if there really is an upgrade because I think that, like you said, a lot of these teams are playing this game of chicken. And somebody's going to say, all right, I'll give over the 2 first-rounders. I need to get X player or that player. It happens every year. It may not be a lot of deals. Like, I don't think there's going to be a lot of big deals. There's only going to be a couple. I don't think Nick's going to be a part of it just because they're going to see that the price tag is going to be too high. And it only takes one GM, as we always say. It only takes one GM to say, okay, I'll do that deal. Just like it took only one GM to do that Rudy Gobert trade. It only takes one GM to say, all right, I'll give her the 4 first-round picks needed for OG Anunoby or whatever. So I think when you see what the Knicks do this offseason, this trade deadline, I think that the roster is going to remain much the same. I think that Obi Toppin will still be here. I think that Derrick Rose may still be here. Maybe that may be more of a chance that he gets traded. They may also, maybe they'll buy him out. I don't know. Well, you can't really buy him out, right? Derrick Rose is a player option next year, right? Or a team option next year.
No, it's a team option.
Team option, right.
They could agree to
buy
buy
him out.
But the benefit of keeping him would be potentially using his salary in a deal in the offseason. So I would think they would hold on to him at the very least until the start of next season and then kind of let him go on his way if they haven't. But up until that point, there's still value in that contract for instance, Josh Hart, if you're looking to clear salary or something along those lines, a team that would want to get off salary might value because essentially Rose is an expiring contract because the team would then have the option to decline that option.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, so it's gonna be tough, but I'm not like last week I would have said I think there's gonna be some moves, but as we get closer, I'm just looking at the landscape right now. I just don't see it happening. I think that you won't see many big trades. That you may see maybe one. I don't know if it's for a star. I mean, I don't know if people would think OG Anunoby is a star. He's probably on the precipice, but I don't think you'll see a lot of big trades because I think that you have a lot of teams all competing for the same guys and and the price is going to be too high. I think you'll see a couple teams fold, but a lot of people say, you know what, we'll just go what we got and we'll see what happens.
I think if and when the first big trade is made, when the first big trade goes down, I think that might break the dam a little bit and be like, okay, the new price has been established, and okay, we're not getting Zach LaVine, or the Bulls say they're set, they're keeping him, and the Raptors trade Fred VanVleet, and they say they're holding on to Pascal and OG, so they just at that point, then teams say, okay, Eric Gordon's the best guy we can get. We might let's see what we have, and we'll give it up. I don't think the Knicks should be one of those guys to settle for one of those veterans. I'd rather play McBride or someone along those lines. It's as opposed to giving up valuable draft capital, for a veteran that doesn't kind of fit the Knicks timeline. The one exception I think is the Obi situation again, and we've been saying it for a while now. If you can get some value for him now's the time to do it, because again, this offseason, you're going to have less leverage because he's going to be a pending free agent at the following season. And again, as we talked about, if you wait to the next February deadline, and last night, last few nights, 13 minutes a game, shoots a few 3-pointers, and that's it. He doesn't have an impact on the game more often than not, because he's just not in a position, doesn't play enough. He doesn't, doesn't have the opportunities to score in the open floor. When he does, he picks up the pace and gets the guard excited, and, brings the team some energies. He's improved a little bit on the defensive end. But again, as long as Randall and Thibodeau are here, it's difficult to envision that changing at any point. So at some point you probably have to recoup your losses. And while you could potentially envision him as a piece in a larger, superstar trade, the team you're trading him to loses, he's less appealing the closer he gets to the free agency. So that's why I think this deadline in particular would make sense for them to recoup some of that draft capital that they invested in him in the 8th overall pick. But we'll see. I agree with you. I think it's unlikely. But if there is one, rotation player that gets moved, I think it would be over.
Trade deadline Thursday, February 9th, 3 p.m. Eastern. That is when shop closes. No more trades can be made. Something will probably happen. I don't know how big it will be, but this will be the time to be on your phone. Make sure you got your Woj notifications on. Make sure you got your Shams notifications on. Make sure you got your Chris Haynes notifications, Mark Stein, Mark Spears, all the great NBA reporters. Make sure you have those notifications on, because they will be breaking news around that time regarding some big trades, and we'll see if the Knicks are involved. But history was made in Los Angeles Tuesday night as Lakers star LeBron James passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to become the NBA's all-time leading scorer. James hit a step-back fadeaway late in the third quarter against the Thunder to set the record. The Lakers did go on to lose that game. James was overcome with emotion after scoring the bucket to pass Kareem. His family joined him on the floor. It was a really nice scene in Los Angeles. Kareem, who was sitting along the baseline, also shared a moment with LeBron James on the floor. Yeah, there was a video montage of his career and people saying congrats to LeBron for the big night. So the NBA scoring leader of all time now is LeBron James. How significant do you feel it is for LeBron to be holding this record?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly significant achievement in the resume, and there'll be days to argue about Jordan and the GOAT and all that stuff, but I think it's important today just to give LeBron his flowers. To think about, it's rare that we'll get to see a player come of age, for his entire career. And I've had the privilege to do that. LeBron being drafted in 2003. I started covering the league about 2 years later. Like I said, I've been fortunate enough to see him countless times at the Garden. And every time is almost more impressive than the rest. The weight of expectations that were thrust upon him as he entered the NBA were unimaginable, and somehow he's exceeded those expectations. He scored more, Bird, and he could be the next Bird, or Jordan and Magic in that class. He scored more points than Jordan and everyone else. He's hit more 3-pointers than Larry Bird. He has more assists than all but 3 players in the history of the sport. Cracked the top 5 last week. There's just never been a player that has, there's just very few athletes that impact the sports, their sport, the way LeBron has. And for him to, again, with those expectations, coming from where he came from, homeless for weeks and months when he's a young teenager, to be thrusted into that spotlight, have $100 million put in his bank account in his lap, and to not be corrupted by it, to marry his high school sweetheart, kind of being a model dad, stay out of trouble. I know I couldn't have kept myself, it's just hard to fathom all the temptations that were in his path, and he stayed on the straight and narrow. And one other thing I just wanted to mention from last night, I thought it was really great to see. There had been kind of a cold relationship, to put it lightly, between Kareem and LeBron. It looked like that thawed a little bit last night. So credit to credit to Kareem for kind of taking the high road. They both had kind of made kind of comments back and forth, but there was it seemed like to be genuine appreciation, and kind of just again, both sides appreciating greatness. And Kareem is a brilliant man, a brilliant human being. If you guys don't subscribe to his Substack, I would highly recommend it. He wrote some about LeBron's passing last night. One of the quotes I found really great was Kareem says, "It's as if I won $1 billion in a lottery, and 39 years later, someone won $2 billion. His winning in no way affects my winning." It's just a mature, way to the lens through which a lot of other players would be jealous, or we see it time after time after time. Kind of the older generation knocking down the newer generation. But Kareem seems to move past that, and I hope that those two guys can sit down together. They're both in LA. They're both community-oriented individuals.
Yeah.
Because I think if they get on the same page, they can do a lot to help the community. And there's just so much that each brings to the table, and I think they both go about things in divergent ways, but I think their end goal is very similar. So I hope that they can kind of have a sit down now that maybe this pressure has been relieved or whatever, and kind of use their forces together, combine their intelligence and their empathy and their kindness and their generosity and their charity, because paired together, that's a really, really dynamic duo, and I hope we get to see it in the near future.
Yeah, I echo a lot of those sentiments. It was funny. People kept talking about how Kareem didn't look as pleased that LeBron was scoring those points. I think you got to give him some grace. I mean, like, I'll be honest, if I had a record for 40 years and I knew it was about to be broken, I would not be happy. It would be hard for me to fake being happy, and I think Kareem was trying his best. He's a 75-year-old man. It's 75-year-old people ain't faking the funk for a lot of things. So he was trying his best sitting there, but as you saw, he got close. Then you started to see the smiles, and I think that you saw obviously when he got in the court, gave him the ball, the pictures, and the words, not just in the Substack as you mentioned, but even in the post game to TNT, all very high praise of LeBron. And I agree. I hope that those two guys can kind of form some kind of bond, because they're too important to the game to have any long-standing beef. I was actually a little worried that there would be something, only because it seemed like there was legit bad blood, like, to me. Like the way, like, and I don't know if necessarily, I think Kareem was picking on LeBron, but I think LeBron had said some stupid things that deserved criticism. Now I think Kareem he took no qualms with saying, "Hey, I'm gonna take this shot now, knowing that this is gonna be the guy that's gonna break my record." But and then someone saw LeBron saying, "I don't care about Kareem," when they asked him earlier in the season about breaking the record. So it was great to see that seemed to be put aside for last night, and there was no drama involved with that, other than some weird Kareem memes of him sitting on the sidelines. It was awesome. Like I tweeted it yesterday. Like, to me, it's LeBron, Kareem, Serena Williams, and Tiger Woods. Those are the only athletes I think in sports history, at least in North American sports history. And maybe Wayne Gretzky. I don't know what his hype was because I wasn't alive during that time. And I'm not close to hockey, but you can say those guys had immense amounts of hype, that they would maybe be the greatest to ever play in their sports. And you can say that those gentlemen and women in Serena Williams, they reached that goal. They essentially lived up to immense, unimaginable hype. Like, people forget, like, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when he was in high school, this was probably the greatest basketball player who ever lived in high school. Like, I know it's the 60s, so people maybe don't understand quite how much hype there was around Kareem when he was Lou Alcindor playing at Powell Memorial in Harlem in New York City. But, like, he was a New York basketball legend as a 15-year-old. So the fact that LeBron is passing him, I think also there's that significance too, because these are two child prodigies that now are 1 and 2 in the rankings. And I think LeBron, in some ways, he's a perfect person to have this record. Like, I'm a big wrestling fan, so I always think of things in a wrestling mindset. And to me, if this was like Vince McMahon booking the history of the NBA, like if he had to pick one athlete to pass Kareem for this record, like LeBron absolutely would have been the choice. Again, like you talked about being on the straight and narrow, we talked about being a great community advocate, being just a good man overall. Tommy's saying I would have been in the streets if I was LeBron James. I would have been in these streets. I like Tommy's like, don't give me that money in that. I would have been a whole different story. So the fact that like LeBron has been a class guy for pretty much his entire career, that he's played the game the right way.
Yes.
He's a great ambassador for the league. So I think it's awesome that if this record was going to be broken by anybody, that it was LeBron James. It's an incredible accomplishment to put up the points he's put up over this long stretch of his career, 20 years, still playing at an extremely high level. I didn't think this record would ever be broken, because I know I'm a I don't want to say I'm a basketball historian, but like I love the history of the game. So I would pour over Kareem's stats, just looking at the longevity and how long he played. And I look at these numbers, I'm just like, there's just no way anybody could play that long, that late in their career and still be effective. And LeBron, the fact that he was able to do that, you can't say enough of it, just about how awesome and amazing he's been. So major congrats to LeBron James.
And he's still averaging 30 points a game this year. We know he's going to be playing until his son comes into the league. I mean, that's the thing. He made a commitment early on. Like, so many great players, and like Kobe talked about how you maximize your talent. Like, there's been so many talented players in the NBA, from Isaiah Ryder to all the Baby Jordan and all the other guys that just had an immense amount of talent. And sometimes it's their knee blows out or their Achilles pop, things out of their control. But when you prepare and treat and you take a serious longevity as LeBron has, it pays dividends down the road. And it's extremely rare for a player with his otherworldly, and make no mistake about it, he was blessed by the basketball gods with the perfect frame and strength and combination of size and athleticism. But his basketball IQ has always been the most impressive thing to me. The way he makes the right play. For the longest time, the criticism against LeBron was he wouldn't shoot in the close. He passed the Danielle Marshall in the corner when that was the right basketball play. It just always impressed me that he didn't feel pressured by others to try to score too many. And so to see him being recognized as and that's something for the rest of his life, he'll be introduced as the leading scorer in the NBA, a 4-time champion. It's so much credit to him and the work that he put in, and proof that if you approach the game the right way and you love her, she'll love you back. And it was just really cool to see.
And I think just for the next generation, the kids growing up who love this game the way you and I do, like, I think it would be great to also say, hey, the guy who has the most points in NBA history, he was a guy that did make the right pass all the time. Yeah. He's a guy that's also top 4 or 5 in assists, or he's going to finish top 4 or 5 in assists. Like, he's a model citizen. He's a guy who's a team guy. Like, not to say that if it was Kobe or Jordan or somebody that would be different, but like, I think to me, if you're a youth coach in anywhere in America, like, this is the best thing you could tell any young player that's coming up, saying, hey, the guy who scored the most points ever, that guy always made the right pass. That guy always made the right play. That guy was always a good teammate. Like, what more could you ask for? Like, I remember we talked about LeBron's, coming up. Like, I wanted to tell the story. I kind of forgot. Like, I was playing basketball at Riverside Church, playing AU ball. I'm like 10 years old. Tobias Harris is on the team. Like, this, like, it was, a real serious thing. We have a practice, and we in practice, and, usually it was in a drive home to Queens where, my parents and we were living, and all the parents were like, hey, are you guys going to New Jersey? And we were like, what's in New Jersey? Why would we be going to New Jersey? They're like, oh, this 16, 17-year-old kid, he's a high school junior, LeBron James, is playing in the primetime shootout in New Jersey. And it's going to be, they're playing Oak Hill Academy. They didn't mention him, but Carmelo Anthony was playing in that game. And they're like, this guy is supposed to be the next big thing. And, my dad, who loves basketball too, is kind of like interested because he loves basketball. He's like, I'm not going to New Jersey for high school kid. Like, well, I mean, that's very interesting that this guy is the next big thing. He was kind of intrigued, but the idea that he's being told by Tobias Harris's dad, hey, we're going to see LeBron James now. You guys should come at 16 years old, and that now I'm talking about this guy on the podcast being the all-time NBA leading scorer. It's still kind of hard to wrap my head around.
And to your point, to your dad's point, like there was a new next guy every year.
Every year, yep.
If it was DeJuan Wagner or Lenny Cook or whoever was Felipe Lopez, all these guys were going to be that next guy, and none of them ever pan out. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them are even make it to the NBA. Some of them are all-stars in the NBA.
Yeah.
No one is ever lives up to the hype, and LeBron had more hype than anybody, and somehow he exceeded it. Is almost unimaginable.
Yep. Big congrats to LeBron James. Also, as we head out here, I want to give a shout out to Jericho Sims. It got completely lost in the sauce because the news came out right as LeBron was breaking the record that he will be in the slam dunk contest. So congrats to Jericho Sims. Hopefully he can keep the slam dunk championship in New York. Obi Toppin won last year in a championship that a lot of people didn't really like. But hopefully this dunk contest will be much better, and that Jericho Sims will do a great job. He's replacing Shaedon Sharp, who has backed out of his commitment. I don't know if he's hurt or what the deal is, but he's not going to be in it. And also shout out to Jalen Brunson, who will be getting his jersey retired at Villanova. Our producer, James, who works at Villanova basketball, will be there. Brunson did talk about this. So I do want to play Jalen Brunson talking about the honor of being having his number retired by Villanova.
Very excited, honoring experience. It's pretty crazy. I don't really have anything to say besides the fact that I didn't really go to Villanova to get my jersey retired. I went there to be a part of something special, and they've returned the favor and more. So from the basketball side to the rest of the sports to the academic side, everything, and at all facets of Villanova, it's been special.
Yep. So shout out to Jalen Brunson for the honor of getting his jersey number retired this week. Shout out to, of course, Jericho Sims entering the dunk contest, and shout out to LeBron James, the NBA's all-time scoring leader. Give everybody a round of applause. Everybody getting honored this week here on the Orange and Blue Bloods podcast. But that's going to do it for this episode of Orange and Blue Bloods. Tommy, let people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter, and check out the Substack, What's on Tap with Tommy Beer. We'll be updating it as the trade deadline picks up steam. You
can find me on Twitter, EJ_Stewart, Instagram, Action EJ. Also, make sure you listen to my podcast, New Generation Podcast Network, where we talk about not just sports, but also superheroes and Star Wars. So you can guys catch that wherever you get your podcasts as well. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Orange and Blue Bloods. Again, Odyssey Original that you can get wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service so you can get these podcast episodes whenever we drop. Friday is our post-trade deadline episode, so that's going to be a big episode, so make sure you guys are here for that. Thank you guys so much for listening to us and watching us on YouTube. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.